I love teaching. Teaching was, I fell into teaching by accident. I hadn't planned to be a teacher. And in the latter stages of my teaching, I had come across this organization through a colleague who said this would be a great thing for the setting we were at to know about. Facing History had this totally organized, rationally put together with all the considerations of a well thought out set of resources and curriculum, and we gobbled it up. At some point in my life, I'd always pledged that I would deal with something that included the Holocaust. My parents are escapees from Hitler's Germany, so this story meant something to me in terms of my own understanding of who I am. So here was this opportunity to stay in education, but at the same time deal with subject matter that I cared about deeply. Facing History's notion is to really consider in a face-to-face way what's happened in the past. But then as quickly as you've done that is also the mirror. Because the idea isn't that you're looking from the outside at something distant and distinct from you, that if you truly give it that consideration and look at it with respect, you'll actually find yourself, unfortunately, in those stories. That's not just a window, it's a mirror. That's me. Every one of us has this capacity to rise to an occasion or fall to something we're just filled with shame about. That's who we are. And it seems to bear out. Many students and teachers as well who've gone through this experience with Facing History have a hard time seeing things superficially. They have their entertainment time, I think, jeopardized because what should be just a time for relief of going to a movie, you suddenly say, well, funny, there's no people of color in this film, or why are all the villains Arab, or why is that person being so laughed at? It's not funny. And you want to just go there to laugh, but unfortunately now you're aware that some of the ingredients and some of the media that we have are the kind of steps that can lead you to lose that obligation you have to others by joining the crowd and laughing at something that's really not that funny. If Facing History is merely an academic exercise, something has gone wrong. The whole notion is that, one, it tries to make the school experience relevant in ways different, I think, than some organizations have. So I think it has to be one in the classroom begins this sense of connection to the material, but boy, if it stays there, something didn't work. There's a bunch of things going on in a bullying incident inside a cafeteria or a gym or a hallway and a genocide. And that definite common thread is the complicity of the majority to do nothing. The license given oftentimes to those who do the vicious acts. In the case of Little Rock, there was a high school where these beautiful 9 children are being victimized for an entire year. In truth, out of the whole high school, there were a band of about 50 who were really doing the acts. Most students sometimes didn't even, quote unquote, know it was going on. It was a choice not to know. Now they knew it was happening, but at the same time they chose to ignore these incidents. So was the whole school doing it? No. The actual perpetrators were 50 or so incorrigibles who had this as their growing up experience. Now does that leave off the hook the other 1,500 or so who did nothing? And again, there were some allies that I'm leaving out who helped the 9 and helped them survive that period. I don't think it leaves those others off the hook. If not for the silence of the 1,500, those 50 could have never done what they did. I think we as a human being, as an animal, have this capacity to be violent. And I think it's hard to get out of the cycle of violence, is what we keep seeing historically. And so the prayer is that you create healthier community, not in response to violence, but in awareness of the potential for violence. So many times a lot of this is about will. The answers can be there, but I don't have the strength of will to follow through on it because it would require me to sacrifice something. I'd have to give up a privilege. I'd have to recognize that I'm capable of that. I'd have to recognize this human tendency. I don't want to do that. So there's an experiment that was done by a woman named Jane Elliott. She continues to do them, I think, to this day, where she breaks people into blue-eye and brown-eyed differences and gets them to actually act in ways that you can't believe. People so quickly reduce themselves to believing that one group is less than the other on this mere suggestion, with some amazing techniques she has to manipulate people to see the truth, quote unquote, of the difference between the two. And then they go through behavior that they have to look back on and feel horrible about. So you often wonder, whoa, do you have the right to put people in such harm's way, to make them see this lesser side of themselves when they would have never behaved this way, probably, had it not been for them experiencing you? Well, the flip side is you say, my God, this is the ultimate educational experience. I've now had to, instead of read about this in a book or see some film about it, I've had to experience the truth of myself and the potential I have to fall victim to some demagogue suggestion that I would follow through immediately on. And I toss and turn over whether she's right to do that or wrong to do that. And I have to end up by saying she's right to do that and she's wrong to do that. And I have to live with that, I think. The Zimbardo experiment, which is with prisoners, not with prisoners, is with college students who enter a so-called prison situation, went horribly awry. And he couldn't even see the role he was playing. He had to be brought to reality by a person who eventually, I think, became his wife, who said, "What are you doing?" And he didn't see what he was doing. And what he was doing and what they were doing, and he was doing by being quiet and not stopping it, was horrific. And none of these people were horrific people, so to speak, before they entered into this behavior that happened just through the suggestion that they're prison guards and inmates. Having said that, I hear that story and I look at Milgram and I look at the blue-eye, brown-eyed experiments and I think, my God, none of the people who were in these could not have been changed, much more so than the standard teaching technique, which is so safe. And as a result, does it transform us, or does it just, is that the easy way out to keep things going the way they've always gone? I think at some level we have to be, we push, hopefully with good editing on ourselves, to see, uh-oh, we're getting a little close to going too far with this. Let's stop for a moment, let's rest. No matter what, the Facing History program's, at least, response to the work we do is a lot about process and sometimes processing process. Now that can lead to even more charged situation because you're realizing something about something. You know, you're getting to this metacognitive or meta-emotional issue. But it is watchful and it's preaching watchfulness, but it's risky. I would say it's certainly riskier than teaching, you know, 28 pieces of fact about the Industrial Revolution. I don't think there's that much risk in that one, probably. And I'd say, oftentimes, I say to teachers, here's the choice we have as human beings in society. I think we'd like to think there's a safe way and there's a risky way. I'm going to put to you, given our knowledge of the history of the world, I'd say there's this risky way that I'm asking you to take because it's better than the riskier way of not taking it. That's the false comparison, risky and safe. No. We as human beings, if we fail to look at this, have to take the risk that's better than the much more risky of not looking at it. And that's, you know, and then again, each person has to be a good judge of how far to go in that task. I think it is sad that schools, because they're on this assembly line to get to a certain point each year with each student, fail to look at the reflective opportunities that students could have about their own behavior in this setting called school. It's a microcosm of the larger society. I mean, you'd have to be blind to the pattern of history. We can't say when it'll happen, and we can't say who will do it, but history suggests that societies will convulse in somewhat periodic ways and take these certain jumping off points and tend to lead, as a result of those jumping off points, into what we want to think is inhuman activity. But sadly, if we would look at it honestly, it's very human. And it's going to take some compensatory choices that acknowledge that to change the game. We have to find a change. There has to be a game-changing decision, or the game will continue played the way it has been with disastrous consequences. I pray that there's a force that I think is right now fairly fertile that'll allow education to become more ambitious than it currently is, which is that we can create not great knowers, but great thinkers and great feelers. And again, that's the other component here, is the minimizing of the affective element that's part of the human endeavor. And so there's a way in which I can express emotion through the arts that also complements my cognitive talents. And those two together is the way in which I think you have a complete human being ready to live as a really productive member of a group, of a society, of a civilization.